Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
Culture as a connection couples can share, episode 105. There are different ways for couples to be connected. Mutual religion as a shared value system, all the many physical activities of tennis, rock climbing, pickleball, dancing, or kayaking. Having shared connections of the ways you enjoy life together really matters. I do suspect that music is the most shared cultural activity by couples. So today I want to talk about being connected through sharing other cultural experiences, something my husband and I have together that has been really important to both of us. So we attend lectures while on vacation at 9:45 in the morning at Chautauqua Institution. And since 1991, we've listened to authors, now online, for Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures. And we've often read the latest book that they have written that they're talking about in the lecture. We especially love theater and even drive to D.C. to see it, or theater festivals as CATF in Shepherdstown, or pop up to Canada. We love theater. We also enjoy art and go to Art Basel in Miami or even the Biennale in Venice one year, and too many museums to count. I take my grandsons to the lovely Zinka Art Gallery in Sharpsburg because it's never too early to start them thinking about art. I even consider watching all my foreign TV shows as cultural, though my husband does not share that. Culture offers so much to anyone as an individual or as a couple. To quote Twyla Tharp, the famous choreographer, art is the only way to run away without leaving home. Even just sharing the silence of absorbing Picasso's Guernica together is a powerful experience. Sharing our perceptions of what we see or hear and our different perspectives keeps our relationship lively. My favorite body part is my brain, and it's the only reason I exercise every morning. And there is something delicious about sharing an artwork or play that gives you so much to think about together. Art and theater both offer you the opportunity to open you up in ways that can be life-changing. Curiosity, according to research by Dr. Martin Seligman, says it is definitely a character strength that makes you happier in life. Dr. Seligman says curious people tend to bring fun and novelty into relationships. Too many people glide by with only paying attention to what's popular instead of pursuing and exploring the unknown. Take a risk. Do something that's a little bit uncomfortable, like a film with subtitles. Life is so much more interesting when you pursue your curiosity into the unknown. So if you are not aware of Guernica that I mentioned above, look it up. Be inspired. Curiosity helps you overcome being stagnant and your fear of uncertainty. Exploring and sampling new experiences makes your world bigger and more interesting. I've tried opera probably 10 different times over the years, and it's not for me. And what's important is that I've given it an honest effort. I will end with this quote from Stella Adler, an actress and acting teacher, that captures why connecting with culture is really so important. Life beats down and crushes the soul, and art reminds you that you have one. David Brooks writes about searching for beauty as the world turns ugly in his wonderful New York Times opinion piece, The Power of Art in a Political Age. He describes a piece of art as a portal to a deeper realm of the mind. Art has the potential to humanize the beholder, he said. Today, I have two guests to talk more specifically about appreciating art and theater. Both have invested decades in each of these important parts of our culture. Dr. Vicki Clark has been a curator of contemporary art, a critic, and a professor for 40 years in Pittsburgh. A child of the 60s who grew up in Southern California, she became an art historian to share her passion for art, challenging us to think differently about and seeing art in new ways. Mark Masterson is a co-artistic director of City Theater and a former artistic director of Actors Theater of Louisville and South Coast Repertory. He is a prominent director and producer of new plays and innovative classics in the American theater. So, Vicki, I want to begin with you. I believe that art is truly a gift to the world. As someone who has devoted your life to art, what makes art important? And tell us, why does art matter?
Well, you know what? I'm going to go back to a quote that you gave me, which was from David Brooks, that a piece of art is a portal to a deeper realm of the mind. And I might rewrite that. Instead of mind, I might say soul, because I think it goes much deeper than the mind. And then it continues, art has the potential to humanize the beholder. And I might even go further than that as well and say that art has the ability to teach us something new about ourselves, that it is an exploration of what it means to be human and how we make sense of the world in which we live. So to me, art has this incredible potential to change us, to change lives, and as I've said too many times in my career, make us think in new ways and look in new ways.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And so I'm really passionate about it. It has given me more than anything in my life. It has given me a knowledge and understanding, as I said before, of myself, but also, more importantly, of other people. I think that as human beings, one of the ways we do that is to tell stories. And there are stories embedded in almost every work of art. And one of the things to do as a viewer is to say, I wonder what story is being told here.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I like that a lot. Why are people so afraid of art and they think they know nothing and can't appreciate it? It keeps so many of us from experiencing what we do, finding a different way to think and feel.
I think that I blame the education system. That, even I'm getting older now, and I had a pretty rigorous education. But my education did not include the classics. It did not really include learning Latin or some of the things that all people who went to school used to learn. And so even by the time I got into the education system, I think it was lesser. It didn't include as much as it used to. And I think that what's happened since then, and thankfully I was not part of it, is that we teach to test now. And that's the only way of determining whether students are learning and whether teachers are doing a good job. And you cannot really test what you learn from art. You cannot put a number on it. You can't have a true fault because none of that is part of art. Yes, I do think there are a few things that are yes or no. Yes, Michelangelo made David. No, it wasn't Andy Warhol. So yes, we do have a few yes and no's. But really, what art is about is delving into something that I believe you don't necessarily understand, and attempting to come to terms with it. And the great thing about art for me is that once you open yourselves up to that, you can look at the same work over a period of time and find different things about it. Now, I'm getting off on a tangent, which I always do, but what schools have done now, I believe very strongly, is stamp creativity out of students. One of my favorite examples was this little boy who was asked to draw the moon. And he just drew a circle. And the teacher said, "That's not a moon." And he said, "Yes, it is." And she said, "The moon is three-dimensional." And he said, "Not when I look at it. I just see one side of it." And the kid was right. He just was looking at it in a way that the teacher wasn't. And the teacher was saying, no, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. So I think that we aren't encouraged to open our minds. And so therefore we think we don't know anything about art. But if you go through a museum with young kids and ask open-ended questions, what they say is totally unbelievable. It might not really apply to the work of art as I know it as an art historian, but it speaks to the kid, and the kid sees something. And the kid sees something that I don't see. And that's what's really great. And that's how you communicate about what an work of art means.
Yes, yes. And I was just thinking about the bad art I made in high school, but I love the students that were in the class because they were so creative and free thinking, and I kept taking courses even though I was terrible at it. But I don't think I was trying to tell a story with my pieces. I was just trying to do what I was told that needed to be done. But I think if I had thought of it as telling a story, it would have been a whole different experience for me.
And you think about how we analyze drawings of children, and you see, oh, daddy's the big one, and mommy's the little one, and mommy's in the house, and daddy's outside the house. The kid is telling a story. Now, you might have thought at that point in your life that you were just showing mommy, daddy, and you, but you were really telling a story without even being aware of it.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. That's really, I've never thought about why what I did was so bad. I just knew it was bad. And I'm sincere in that. I'm not fishing. I sincerely know that they weren't good. But I think if I had understood I should tell a story, it would have been a different experience.
This is another reason why art is so difficult for people to look at, because we believe, and we have believed since the Renaissance, so let's say from 1500, that we need to make art that looks exactly like the world. We want what we call realism. But that's only one way, because art, let's just take painting. Painting is about the arrangement of shapes, lines, and colors on a flat surface. So first off, it can't be real because it's flat and our world is three-dimensional. But we want art to look like what we see around us. And we judge it on those standards rather than saying, oh, why does that person's head have such a big ear? Why? Oh, that's wrong. That's bad art. No, it is not necessarily bad art. The artist probably had a reason to do that. And one of the things we've learned in the 19th, 20th, and now 21st centuries is we do not have to replicate the world around us. So we have imaginations. We can make things look like we want them to look, and to tell whatever story or whatever feeling we want to communicate, because art is about communication.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Mm.
And that's why, in a way, I feel that why I'm so excited to be talking to you about this today, because this is in a series about how two people can communicate with each other. And they are using, in this case, a work of art which is made to communicate. Now, where we get in trouble, I think, in our culture is that we want to know what it is communicating, instead of going and saying, I think maybe it's talking about, oh, that's red and that's a figure. I wonder if that's blood. If that's blood, that might be trouble. But if it's red because I saw a red sunset, then it might induce a feeling of awe, a feeling of being enveloped in that color of the sunset, and you see things in a different way. And I think that the great thing about looking at art more and more and more is that you feel freer about seeing those kinds of things.
Yes. Yes.
And back to the communication between two people. You and I went through a show together just last week. And if you recall, when we were talking, I would frequently say, well, what did you think? What do you see? And it's because, yes, I have more knowledge about art than you do, and I probably see more things, but that doesn't mean I am right. Because you see what you see based on who you are and what your experiences are. And so if you have two people talking to each other, you taught me things in that museum visit, and I taught you things, and we learn and we shift. We are not static beings. We're always changing. And art is always changing, and how we look at art is always changing.
Yes, yes, that's right. Wow. I've really appreciated how much fun it is to be with you in a museum, too. And you give lots of room for whatever the opinion is. There isn't a certain way you're supposed to do it. And that's really cool. Yeah.
One of the things I've always enjoyed about teaching, and this is at the university level, so it's totally different than teaching kids about art, is I like to draw things out of the students, and they will tell me the most convoluted story about what the work of art is all about. And then I like to look at them and say, oh boy, that's really interesting. Wrong, but really interesting, because I never want to shut down somebody's feelings or opinions about what the work of art is about.
Yeah. And I've experienced that with you. Yeah.
It's
No, you're really serious about it. Yeah. So how do we go about engaging with art in a way that would help us understand it better? How can we improve our connection? Some of which you've already talked about, but I'm sure you have more you can say. How can art add more meaning in our lives? Any of that you want to expand upon?
Well, I think that people get stopped when they're looking at visual arts because they think it is elitist and that only rich people can buy it and only rich people can go see it and only educated people can understand it. But the visual arts aren't any different than a cartoon. Kids understand cartoons. We understand cartoons. Why do we think we can understand a cartoon, which is visual, but not a painting or a sculpture? It is a different language, and that's always a problem. But it doesn't matter if you know the language. It's what you are seeing with your eyes and how that affects you. I mean, color is the easiest things because we do have emotional associations with color. But a line, a curve, if a line goes across a canvas, it moves your eye, but it also implies that there's movement there. So if you learn a few tricks like that, you can start understanding the visual language, and then you can start interpreting the work of art. And I do think that there are some ways to open yourself up to that. And I think that one of the best ways is to talk to artists or to watch videos about artists. There is an absolutely brilliant series on PBS that's free called Art 21. And what they do is 15-minute segments, and they go into a contemporary artist's studio and talk to the artist about how they make their art or what they're thinking about. And so you have the opportunity in the peace and quiet of your own home, whenever you want to watch one of those 15-minute segments and see what the artist himself or herself is thinking about. And if you start watching enough of those, you get a sense of what this world is about, and it's just going to blow your mind wide open. There's another series that I've never watched much, but a lot of people talk to me about it, and it's Sister Wendy. And Sister Wendy is a nun who does art history, and she is very open and very funny and just engages people. It's just getting past that initial barrier.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, because I think there's something about how we don't want to be uncomfortable and we don't know enough, and so we avoid and we deflect instead of kind of stepping into it and finding out and seeing what we think or what we feel. So yeah, I like that.
And I think that if you're talking with somebody else, as we were just saying, what I do is ask a question. And I think if you are going somewhere with somebody, you ask a question. And I know that you're also talking to Mark Masterson about theater. And I just was at a theater performance that actually Mark directed with a friend of mine. And afterwards, we go to dinner, and I'll say, well, what do you think that meant? Or, I don't get that, or I don't get this. And we'll frequently just start with, did you like that or not? And most of the time I'll say, I know you didn't like that. Or he'll say, I know you didn't like that, because we know each other very well. And then we start there, and it gives us what I like to call a point of entry. And that's what labels in a museum should do. They should give you a few things or just one thing to look at. And that gives you that starting point. And then boom, you can go from there.
Yes, I think when museum labels are too long, you get lost in reading the label instead of experiencing the art piece.
Or when we talk about disidentificatory practices, well, what in the world does that mean? And that's how we talk, and that's how we write. And we have art speak, but I can also point out that every field has that. I was sick in California once. I went to a doctor out there, and he told me I had ulcerated stomatitis. I had no idea what that was. And when I came home and saw my doctor, I said, what is it? He said, that's a sore throat. So, we have these languages, and we're not even aware of how we're using them. But we all see, and you can look at something, and even if you start with, I don't see anything here. I don't see a chair. I don't see a tree. Well, then what's there? Well, it's purple. Okay, well, let's start with it being purple. And what does that purple bring up associations with you? Do you have any memories of something being purple? How did you feel? And you can go from one of the smallest little things or the simplest things, and then you just start hopefully noticing things. Oh, but did you see that little yellow dot over there? No, I didn't. Oh, well, what do you think that does? And then together you explore it. And the another thing, I mean, I've taught so much that I have all these things in the back of my mind, but in my mind, the artist makes a work, right? And they attach a meaning to it. They know, for the most part, what they're trying to say. Then it goes out into the public realm. Well, in many ways, I, as a curator, I'm going to be one of the first people to see it. And so I look at it and I put it in a context of other things I've seen. Sometimes I can tell the artist something they didn't know that is in that work. And so then we have a conversation and we both learn something from it. Then, as a curator or as a critic, I interpret that work for other people. And then a lot of people see it and they see it through their own eyes. And so we have a conversation. And although we like to think of artists as geniuses and give them all the power, as viewers, we have as much power as they do. And therefore, any interpretation really is valid, and we can all learn from different interpretations.
Yes, yes. Which is about the connecting. That's really neat. What should someone do when they look at an artwork but find it confusing?
Well, just admit that it's confusing. You know, I mean, I've looked at I've looked at so many works of art, and so I'm a very fast looker. And I can go into a museum and I can just walk by and say, nope, 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 not interested, and walk right by because I know what I'm looking at. So there are also times, and there are many, many of them, where I don't understand what's going on. And I'm going, wait a minute, that doesn't fit anywhere in my base of knowledge about art. What is going on here? And I can generally put a couple of things together, but sometimes I just have to leave it and say, you know what? I don't get it. Maybe I'll come back to it, or maybe I'll see something else that I can understand. I don't have to understand everything.
Okay, that's freeing all by itself. What suggestions do you have to improve our enthusiasm for art?
Just enjoy it. I mean, it's, I mean, everybody has different loves. And, some people love watching football. Some people love looking at art. And I think another word that you mentioned in your introductory remarks was curiosity. Be curious. I mean, I've always said that if I lost my curiosity, I was dead because I'm curious about everything and I love to ask questions. And I think that's a good thing too. You look at a work of art and say, why is there a horse there? There was a video at the Carnegie several years ago, and this guy was talking about what it means to be kind of alien within our own world. And so he somehow arranged to take animals one by one into a hotel room and film them there and see what they did in a hotel room. It was totally out of their realm of understanding. And just to see what they did, they ripped up the pillow. No, they just sat in the bed and went to sleep. And each one of them in an alien environment found something different to do. So when you're in an alien environment, you just take baby steps and learn one thing or another and ask questions. Why is there a horse in that bedroom? And if you think about it, you might come to the idea of, oh, that's like me when I'm in an uncomfortable situation or somewhere I've never been. And again, then you have some kind of empathy or some kind of communication with the artist.
Mm-hmm. I found this quote by the author Elbert Hubbard that I'm hoping you can explain. Art is not a thing, it is a way.
Well, yes and no. I mean, art is a thing. There is a painting hanging on the wall, or there is a sculpture standing on the floor. But again, I think it goes back to the communication. It is not a static thing, and that might be the key word. And it's like our personality. Um, I grew up in California. I now live in Pittsburgh. I still consider myself a California girl. So I'm a hybrid somehow. I'm neither one nor the other. And my personality flits between the two of them and a lot of other things. And so things are always evolving, and art is always evolving, and art is finding new ways to express things. I mean, another way to think about an artist is to consider an artist a problem solver. Okay, so right now we have major discussions about climate change. And so artists are dealing with that in their work. And they are trying to come up with solutions that are going to improve the quality of the planet. Now, why do we think an artist's solution is less intelligent or less valid than a scientist's? Because we place different values on them. But artists come from the environment in which we all live. We all share that environment. We are all dealing with it. Our way of dealing it is either protesting or supporting or sending money or, composting or whatever. An artist's way of dealing with it is to express it visually in a way that will hopefully communicate something about the issue to other people. And I think that's another reason that people are so unsatisfied. They're not unsatisfied. They just don't feel comfortable in a museum because every artist is asking questions. And we're in a very turbulent time, so the issues are turbulent. So the art's going to be turbulent, but that doesn't mean it can't be beautiful at the same time. We can hold contradictions together. We can see both sides of an issue. And an artist is a problem solver helping us to do that.
Yes, I agree. There are so many artists and types of art over many centuries. Where do we begin?
I would begin with today. I dive into the deep end of the swimming pool and look at stuff that looks absolutely crazy. And, I would just start with something that I don't understand, because I think that's a good test. But then I go back to something I do understand. And a very good example, I think, is folk art or outsider art, because that's made by people who were not trained to be artists. So they are using their imagination. And if we were making art, we'd be doing the same thing because we haven't learned how to draw a straight line. And when you look at folk art, you see the imagination. You see how people, just like children, put things together in a way that makes sense to them. So then I'd go back and forth. I'd go to children's art or folk art and say, wait a minute, that's not realistic. But boy, it certainly is beautiful, and boy, it's funny, and it's a lot of fun, and kind of keep going back and forth. I mean, there are certain periods of art that I don't like at all, and I'm not ashamed to say, I don't like Michelangelo that much. I know he's a brilliant artist, but I don't like him that much because I judge things on both levels, on what I know is good art, but also what I like. And there is nothing wrong with just sticking with what you like.
Mm. Okay, my last question. Can you offer anything besides Art 21 on PBS, tools, books, or documentary that could be helpful, and any last things you want to share with my audience about art?
Well, I think that in this age that we live in, there are so many resources online. And I've mentioned Art 21 because I use it in all my classes. I use it myself to get to know an artist because if I understand how an artist talks, I can get what they're trying to do. So there are tons of those. And you've got Bob Ross who paints on TV and everybody can watch how he does it. You can look at Mr. Rogers. He did episodes on how to make art. And there are very simple things like that. There are instructional videos. There are so many different ways to come to it. So you can find something online that makes you comfortable as an introduction. I think that docent tours can also help in a museum because the docents know a lot about the work. And if they don't stand there and lecture you on it, but if they have that sense of a point of entry, you might think about this, you might think about that, you'll gain a lot of knowledge. Labels can also be helpful. These are all things that we in the museum world put out there to help people. But I don't know, maybe what I want to say as an end is just let go. Don't be worried about whether you're going to say something stupid. Don't we say stupid things all the time? I do. And sometimes those stupid things have a kernel of truth in them. And the more you feel comfortable asking questions or saying stupid things, you start to learn. I mean, it's a process of learning just like anything is. And it gives such incredible pleasure because there are stories, there are colors, there are scenes, there are things we know nothing about. It is just such a phenomenally rich world. And you're denying yourself an incredible pleasure if you don't look at it. And if you've got somebody to go do it with, then it's kind of like double your pleasure, like double mint gum, and you get twice as much at least. It's exponential, that knowledge. And the more you have, the more you will get.
Absolutely. I really like what you said about points of entry and thinking about different points of entry because I know that I've been on docent tours that I thought were terrific, but that's what they did. And I didn't realize what made a good docent tour versus an ordinary one where I'm just overwhelmed with information and it isn't that interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Because as I said before, there isn't necessarily one set way to look at a work of art. And what you want to do, how you want to help somebody, is to fire up that imagination. Say, okay, this is about that purple flower. And then and that's even too specific, but then let the person just go with that. And if people have trouble just letting go, then you can, if you're with somebody, you can say, well, what purple flowers do you know? Well, the crocuses are out right now and they're purple. Well, what is that? Oh, that's spring. Oh, so we've got purple in spring. And is that what this is about? No, purple is also royal. So let's think about that. And you can just start with what you know and then free your mind and just kind of fly with it. Play. Play is a great word. I will go to museums. I saw something at the Venice Biennale this year by the American Bruce Nauman, and I laughed throughout the whole show. I just laughed out loud, and people looked at me like, oh, who is that crazy American? But it was so funny. It was brilliant, but it was so funny. And it was one of the best things I saw in Venice because I totally enjoyed it, and I was not working.
Thank you so much for joining me today and helping my audience think about art as a connection. And I love what you said about sharing and enjoying and connecting and playing. So those are the themes we're going to leave you with.
I think it's really great that you are open and intuitive to know that something like this can be such a great tool to share. It's also it's a safe way to say things that you might not be able to say otherwise. Because it's removed and it's visual. It's not words which we're used to. But, in many ways I also think visual art and sound, music have a lot in common because they aren't totally concrete.
That's right.
So,
right. Thank you.
This was great. I love talking about art. Obviously, I love art. It's my life. It is my passion. And I wish everybody had that passion.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hoping we're going to spread the word a little bit. So, Mark, I will begin with the same first two questions I gave Vicki. I believe art is truly a gift to the world. As someone who has devoted their life's work to the theater, what makes art important? And tell us why theater matters.
Well, there's a lot in that question, Rhoda. I'll do my best.
Yes.
I think that art is one of the ways that we try to make sense of the world. And I think that's true for both the artists and the viewers or the participants in art of any kind, because fundamentally it's a way to bring order and structure and an interpretation of something that is very difficult to rationally understand, which is the order of things, why we're here. I mean, I know it sounds very kind of heady, but it's true if you think about it that art is a way to organize what we perceive and to try to make sense out of it. Now, theater specifically is a communal activity. Although there have been experiments in doing theater for an audience of one, particularly during COVID. But I've seen those experiments in other situations. I don't find them very satisfying because for me, theater is about sharing experience with others. And it's a way to have your reaction, whatever it is, whether you love it or you don't like it, or you have questions, or you're puzzled by something. You're in a room with other people who are also responding. And so through their response, you get to experience or sort of evaluate your own response to something. And that shared experience is a very important, fundamental part of being human. And so I think that these things are related. I think that you can overthink them, certainly. That it's we don't mean to be I don't mean to be so kind of self-important about that, but I have a brother who is a preacher, and we've had lots of discussions over the years about what he does in the pulpit, with his congregation, speaking to them about questions of life and The difference really between religion and theater is that theater isn't have a dogma. There's no, it's more about the questions than it is about the answers. And and yet there's still this very human need to gather together to hear a story. It's one of the most ancient things that we do as people, is to attend a storytelling event of some kind, whether it's around a campfire or in a theater or frankly in a movie theater. That's different, and share our experience with others.
Hmm. It's my favorite art form. I really invest in a lot of tickets because I really love theater. And I think you're right. I think it is that communal feeling and the experience of being a part of whatever's happening on the stage. I agree. So, how do we go about engaging with theater in a way that would help us understand it better? How can we improve connecting with it? Or how can theater add more meaning to our lives? Any of those will do.
Yeah, again, there's a lot to talk about there. Um, First of all, I don't think we should be too precious about it. I mean, when you say theater, it means so many different things, right? So you don't need an instruction manual to go enjoy The Lion King or many Broadway shows or musicals. You may like them, you may not like them, but there's no mystery involved. It's not difficult to access. It may be too expensive. There may be other barriers. But in terms of just enjoying the art form or participating in the art form, I don't think I don't think it's that difficult, and I don't think we should be too precious about it. I do think that there are different forms of expression in live theater and performance, which are sometimes a little more mysterious than others. But I would say that even if you don't like something, just go. Just be in the room and figure out why you don't like it or what it is that you respond to and what in a positive way, and the kinds of things that mean something to you. When you go to the art museum, you don't like every painting in the exhibit, probably. I don't. And that same thing is true of any art form. You're going to exercise your own critical judgment and decide what speaks to you. And that's what it's all about, actually. It's not about whether you get it or you don't get it. It's about what it means to you or doesn't mean to you and how you can take that. And maybe, the other thing that happens is that sometimes you don't feel it, you're not on that wavelength in the moment that you see it, but then 2 days later, something comes to you, an image comes to you, or you recall the experience and it speaks to you in a different way. That's okay too. It can unfold slowly, it can unfold rapidly. It's not that hard. Just do it.
We recently saw one of the worst plays we've ever seen at CMU. And I made a point at the next play of walking up to this woman, Annabelle was her name, and saying, "You were so memorable and wonderful in a terrible play." And immediately she said, I know, it was awful, wasn't it? And she was outstanding. And the play just felt like a 20-year-old was writing about 50-year-olds or something. It didn't jive.
Probably that's
But
what was happening.
it was really fun though to hear and see and enjoy. And so I kind of take the parts that I enjoy and like, and I don't have to do the whole thing. It just, depends on what's going on. I thought I would begin with asking you about a quote from Oscar Wilde, who I really like. "I regard the theater as the greatest of all art forms, the most immediate way in which a human being can share with another the sense of what it is to be a human being. What do you think about that? And can you expand on it for my audience? And
It's maybe the first Oscar Wilde quote that I've ever heard that wasn't a joke. Because he's so sort of
that's
famous
true.
for that. Um, yeah, I mean, I do think that the role that theater has played, throughout human history, I guess, um, has changed. I mean, theater and religion were the same at one point in our human evolution, right? And then theater sort of branched off and became its own thing, different kinds of storytelling, and that really happened in earnest around the Elizabethan era and Shakespeare's, expressions of what that culture was and how they were making sense of the world, which still has meaning today. I do think that theater has people. There's another quote. I forget who said it. It may have been Oscar Wilde. I think the quote is that theater is the only art form that has been dying for 2,000 years, and that it's people will say that the era of theater is over because film came along, or that television has taken over the place of theater in American culture, at least. Um, and the truth is that there are still a whole lot of people going to live theater performances around the country and around the world. Theater is alive and well, which is not to say that there aren't challenges in running a theater or in using that medium, but it does maintain its relevance. And so I love that people like you love the art form as I do, and we want to share that with you, and we want to expand the number of people who have access. We do spend a lot of time thinking about what are the barriers that people have to participating in live theater. Um, a lot of people think that money is a key barrier. I'm not so sure that's really true. When you look at what people spend money on, they spend money on a lot of other things that are even more expensive and maybe less substantive or less nourishing, different kinds of experiences that people value. And there's a place for all of that, and there always has been. So I think we just keep striving for open access to identify ways for people to come and enjoy and participate. We try not to take ourselves too seriously, and we tell stories in different kinds, even plays that don't have a traditional plot with a beginning and a middle and an end. And there aren't that many of those, but they are also storytelling. They are also ways of organizing, your interpretation of the world, and they are something that you can measure yourself against when you go to see it. That's what I think.
I like that. Okay, so many of us in my audience know that there is what's supposed to be good, and we aren't sure why. Why people are afraid of art in theater. So why do you think that they know nothing? So when someone feels that they know nothing and can't appreciate it, it keeps so many from experiencing what artists do. How can they find a different way to being open to however they think or feel? That there's not a right answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like what we were talking about earlier, that there are real barriers and there are perceived barriers, and no one likes to feel stupid, right? I mean, we don't choose to do something on purpose that makes us feel stupid. But theater isn't trying to do that. That too is a measure of one's own kind of way of sharing in this art form. I think that it's important to just participate. That's it. I mean, some things you may not get or you may not like. That's okay. It's okay not to like something. You don't have to have a reason. You just don't like it. I remember um, going to a play in New York City, and this was a long time ago. Um, and I was just blown away by this experience. I was completely transfixed. My mouth was hanging open during the performance. It was so incredible. And intermission came, the lights came up, and I was there by myself. And I just wanted to talk to somebody about it. And I turned to the person who was sitting next to me, who was a complete stranger, and that person was sound asleep. And, I realized then that we all have different experiences. We all have different things that speak to us. I shouldn't expect that what speaks to me necessarily is the same thing that speaks to you. That's okay, right? The guy eventually woke up and we had a conversation about why I was so excited, and that is the point of it, right? It's like, oh, you saw that? I didn't think of that. I didn't see it that way. Or, that really wasn't my thing. Not my cup of tea is a perfectly acceptable response to seeing art of any kind.
I think memorable is part of going to a wide range of theater. I still remember when City Theater was that tiny little box in Oakland, and there was this play, and I'm pretty sure it was by the South African playwright whose name escapes
Athol
me.
Fugard.
Yes, and it was a woman, and in this very crowded situation. I don't remember, but
It was the
it's
road to Mecca. I
that's it.
remember.
And it totally stays with me after all these. I mean, that's decades ago, but it is still a very powerful play for me, and I'll never forget it. And I think that's just a wonderful thing. In 2017, there was research led by the UCL Division of Psychological and Language Sciences that found when watching a live theater performance, you can synchronize your heartbeat with other people in the audience, regardless whether you know them or not. What do you think about this as evidence of the power of theater?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, as a producer of theater my whole career, I've seen a lot of different audiences. And the other thing that's true is breathing. An audience will synchronize their breathing, and you can, like, when there's something happening that's on stage that's speaking to everyone in the room, things get very still, and you can have a full house of people, and it's very still. And that is one of the most powerful things that I experience as a producer of theater, is when the audience as a group kind of transports themselves to another time and place through their imagination, their collective imagination. And that's something you can't get at home watching your widescreen TV. That's something that is at the root of what theater is and what theater can be and what theater does when it does it well. And we don't always reach that level. We strive for that, but we may not always be there in spite of our best efforts. But when it happens, it's very powerful. And so breathing leads to your heart rate, and that's how it happens, is that people are all watching the same thing, experiencing it in different ways, but together. And that synchronization of breathing and heart rate and just sort of mind melding with a group of other people um, is I can't get enough of that. I keep seeking those experiences, both as a producer and as a viewer of theater. I want to I want to experience that again. The next time I go, I'm always hopeful that whatever I see, I'm going to be transported in that way with other people. Prior to COVID, we used to talk about the power of breathing the same air as a bunch of other people, strangers really, in the room, breathing the same air. We don't talk about that the same way now, in the era of COVID, because people don't want to breathe the same air. But so, some people wear their masks. That's okay. But it is that collective experience that that is so wonderful and that we hope for.
Yes, I agree. What are different ways to enjoy theater performances? What do we look for to be more appreciative as an audience member? Or what can we do to improve our appreciation? Any suggestions that people can pursue?
I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's just go, just try it, just see what you like, and there's no right or wrong is the thing. There have always been critics, and critics, have used to be much more powerful than they are now, because they would publish their opinions in newspapers and magazines, and everybody would go to read that informed opinion in order to find out whether they should go or not, right? But in a way, those opinions, even an informed opinion of a critic, someone who's actually takes it seriously and studies it, it's still just an opinion. It might not speak to that critic, but it might speak to you. And so I think it's important to be open and just, enter a performing space of different kinds with an open mind and an open heart, and then see where it takes you. That's all. It's not that complicated. I do think that we all have preconceptions of what the art form is, and like if you go to see, did you go to see the Carnegie International recently? Well, some of what was in that exhibit was made people, question or scratch their head and go, is that art? Or I could have done that, but the truth is they didn't do that. And so what they're really saying is that that's not for me. That's not speaking to me, right? And I think it's okay for all of us to have different tastes. And in the era of crowdsourced opinion, which we are in, you may not have the newspaper review to tell you where the best restaurant is or what the best theater is. But you can certainly find out other people's opinion, and then you can measure yourself against those opinions and make a decision about what you want to see and what you might not, what you might want to take a pass on.
This is my last question. There's an ongoing audience survey by the Old Vic Theatre in London in which 93% of respondents so far have agreed and strongly agreed that theater benefits their mental health and well-being. What do you think about that?
I don't know. There are a lot of crazy people in the theater, so I don't know whether that really helps. It keep you in business, Rhoda.
It might be partly that watching somebody else's story makes you think about the different paths and choices you could have made in your own life or the different parts of you. That's how it kind of resonates for
I think
me when I
that was
read
an
that.
excellent answer. But I do think that we are in the theater. People who work in the theater, we are in the empathy business. We put stories out with the goal of moving people and transporting people and exercising that muscle of empathy. And I do think that is a quality that is in shorter supply today than it used to be. And I think that's one of the things that we can bring to the table: empathy, community, shared experience, creativity. I once was part of a study that was run by this wonderful creative sort of advertising person named John Demon. He ran a firm in Pittsburgh called Demon Nelson for many years. And he really got curious about this, why do people participate in art? So they did a bunch of research that was led by Harvard and Business School. And one of the things, they discovered some really interesting things that about people's opinions about art and why they participate in art. But one of the things was that art helps, even just viewing art is a creative experience. Just going to something. And it's the same is true of music, right? You go to a concert, or you even if you just put it on by yourself in your home, that creative expression isn't just somebody else's creative expression. It's also triggering something in you that is fundamentally important, which is creativity. So creativity is a value, and creativity is an experience. And people say, "Oh, I'm not creative." That's not true. They may listen to music, they may sketch, they might go to the theater. There are so many different ways of being creative. It's not necessarily about generating the content. It might be about experiencing it.
Oh, I like that a lot. I do. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.